Kia ora team, I hope you're all doing well. Unfortunately, I won't be able to be meeting with you in person for the rest of this week, so I thought I'd put this video together to help you go through the slides if you find this useful. So let's have a little bit of a look at the digestive system. The Te Rautaki i Te Wiki for this week. Firstly, we're going to go through the digestive system fundamentals. Secondly, we're going to look at digestion, absorption, and what we call egestion. Thirdly, we're going to look at the types of eaters, and then we're going to do a little bit of reflection in lesson 4. Now I'm going to move on to lesson 1 now. If you've already gone through lesson 1, which you did with me in person, but if you missed that, you can follow along. If you've already gone through it, you don't need to. I'm going to try and put timestamps in the bottom of the video so you can skip through to the part that's relevant to you. Okay, firstly, we've got a little mahia for you to try, organising each of these into the smallest versus the largest. And if you want to have a go at that, give it a go, pause the video, otherwise I'm going to move on and give you the answer in 3, 2, 1. There we go. The answers. We can see the cell, that's the right word, is the smallest little unit here. And if it's hanging out on its own, it's not super effective. It can do its job, but it really needs some friends to help it out. So if our cell joins up with a whole bunch of other similar cells grouped together, we call this a tissue. Our various layers of tissue, when they're all joined together, can form a thing called an organ. And an organ does a specialized job within the body. A whole bunch of organs working together we call an organ system. And collectively, our organ systems each do the entire process of a particular important thing that we need our bodies to do. Here you can see an example of the digestive system, right? One of our organ systems responsible for processing our food and turning it into a form that our cells in the rest of our body can access and get the goodness, all the nutrients, all the fuel, all the water, all the various bits and bobs that they need in order to be able to survive and thrive. Lastly, if we add all our organ systems together and package everything up, we get our organism, and that's us there. All right. Now, if you were present, you would have seen me go through this video. If you haven't gone through this video, I'll leave that there for you to look through. This covers the digestive system in a lot of detail. You do not need to know the level of detail in this video, but it's a really good sort of introduction, and it's also a nice little video to go back to after you've got a thorough understanding to really test your understanding of the key terms that we're going to be learning over the next few lessons. Okay, here we have a little image of some of the key organs involved in our digestive system, and the description of the main function of our digestive system, which is to break down our food and to get the good bits out of it, what we call the nutrients. Now that specifically refers to the sugars, the fats, and the proteins. It also refers to the water and the salts, all the various things that we need in order to be able to survive and thrive. It's really important for the process that we call cellular respiration, which is how our cells take those sugars and those other fuels that we get out of food and turn them into cell energy, which they can then spend on all the processes they need to do in order to keep us living. So let's move to slide 7. On slide 7, you'll see that there's a bunch of unlabeled organs. Your challenge is to try to label these as best you can. Hint is that the answer's on the previous slide. So if you've got that, you've nailed that, you can move on to this slide, which talks about the functions of each digestive organ. And you're welcome to have a little bit of a Google to find out more about these things. The only real tricky one is pronouncing esophagus. You might see that spelt esophagus or esophagus. That's the American spelling, os or oesophagus or esophagus, whatever it may be. That's the British or sort of New Zealand more common spelling. All right, with that, if you've done it, fantastic. We're moving on to lesson 2. Lesson 2 is about describing ingestion, digestion, absorption, and egestion. So before we dive into that, I want you to have a go at describing the function of the digestive system and why it's important for cells. Why is it important for cells of the body that we digest our food? I'll give you the answer in 3, 2, 1. Yeah. The major reason, or the major function of our digestive system, as we were talking about just before, is about breaking down our food and getting all the good stuff out of it, all those nutrients, and taking them into our bloodstream. Then we can use all those fuels to be able to power our cells. All those nutrients can be used in our cells across our body. That's why it's important for our cells, right? Because they need to be able to do this, cellular respiration. There's another great video for you here. It's pretty gross, but I recommend it, going into our digestive system in more detail. So I'll leave that for you as a little bit of a review. All right. Now, there are 4 main processes that you need to know regarding our digestive system. I've told you them before: ingestion, digestion, absorption, and egestion. And they occur in that order. Firstly, we take in our food. When you're eating your lunch, you're taking in a substance into your mouth, you're taking it in, that's ingestion. Digestion is when we break down our food into even smaller parts, leaving us with things that are able to be taken in. And that process of taking things into our bloodstream is called absorption. And that is when all the nutrients, all the good stuff from the food enters our bloodstream via some processes. And those processes we call osmosis and diffusion. Osmosis and diffusion. Lovely little processes which we'll go into more detail about in the weeks to come. Our last process is what we do with our waste. Now, we take in our food at the start, we must take it out at the end. Excretion or egestion. In versus e, or eat. That's a little bit hard to remember. Egestion is going back out. Think excretion, right? This little emoji here, I think you all know what it is. That's the result of egestion. It's just feces. We've got a little image here to help you out with those 4 parts. Ingestion of the food in the mouth, digestion down this part here, absorption as things come out and into the bloodstream, and then elimination or egestion, right, as the feces come out. Here is a first of your little exercises to complete for this lesson. I want you to arrange these 4 little panels here in the order that they occur in our digestive system. I'll leave that for you to do. When you finish that, you can test this one, which is a little bit harder, which is talking about the organs in which each of these processes occur. So where does ingestion occur, where does digestion occur, where does absorption occur, and where does egestion occur? If you know the function of the organelles, that might help you with this. All right, now we're moving on to lesson 3, types of eaters. Specifically, we're looking at animals' diets and how what their teeth look like tells us a lot about them. Before you do that, though, I want you to try doing this little mahia up here. You can see it says describe the difference between ingestion and digestion and identify the organs involved. It's going to be pretty similar to the types of questions we give you at the end of this term. So give it a go. And when you finish that, I'll give you the answer. Pause the video now if you want to. Otherwise, I'm going to give you it in 3, 2, 1. Very good. So here we go. Ingestion is the process of taking food in. and you can see it here. It occurs in what we call the oral cavity. Oral refers to the mouth. Cavity is like a space, and goes into oesophagus or eosophagus or oesophagus, however you want to pronounce that. And then digestion is different. It's the process of breaking down that food into the nutrients so that those nutrients can later be absorbed. And the organs that are involved in digestion are our teeth, tongue, salivary glands, stomach, and small intestine, all of which are very important in that process. A little bit of our digestion occurs in our large intestine, but most of it is occurring here in our small intestine, right? But that's specifically related to our absorption, which we'll talk about at a later stage. All right. Here we have a little video looking at exactly the topic of the lesson for today, which is how we categorize living things based on what they eat. If you watch this, you're going to be at a distinctive advantage for understanding the next couple of slides. So give that a watch and then come back and finish this. If you've already watched it, fantastic. Let's move on. We have some different kinds of teeth here, and there's some functions that they do. The key things that you need to know is that these different teeth have different shapes because different ones are better or worse at certain functions. Incisors, which is our ones right at the front here. Incisors are great for cutting. If you ever have a piece of celery or a carrot and you put it between your incisors, you'll find it's much easier to crunch it, so to cut it in a nice clean way than it is if you try to put it on the side. You'll notice a couple of pointy little teeth here. Now ours aren't as sharp as say a cat's are, but that's because cats are evolved to be to consume, I guess, a larger proportion of meat in their diets. You need to be able to tear that meat, and so that's what canines are for. We then have these teeth called premolars, and if you look at your molars, these ones towards the back, you've got some in the front which are better at crushing, and some ones towards the back which are our molars, which are better for grinding. There's some more complex stuff which you can look up too about teeth, and I recommend you spending some time on that if you're into this sort of thing. The key thing that we want you to get from here though is different teeth have different jobs. Now, some organisms have different sets of teeth than others, and here's some examples here. We've got one skull with these big canines, right? A whole bunch of premolars, not many molars. We've got another one here with some lovely incisors at the front and a big gap where you'd expect canines to be. Then you've got a lovely strong set of molars and a couple of premolars here towards the back. Then you've got a skull that looks like ours. Smaller teeth in general and a kind of a blend between the two. We've got a little bit of that canine, right? A little bit of that incisor and a nice sort of healthy-ish, but not as large as the herbivore, set of these molars here. Now, that relates to what these organisms eat. Organisms that only eat meat, we call carnivores, right? They primarily eat meat. They have those incisors and canines nice and sharp, ready to be able to kill their prey, or if it's not about killing, it's about ripping and tearing the flesh into small parts so they can eat it up. Herbivores, on the other hand, primarily only eat plants, right? So their teeth are much broader and flatter for crushing the strong plant fibers, which they need to grind up in their mouths. You can think of sheep and cows as good examples of that, right? Lots of time chewing the cud. That's absolutely a sort of herbivore thing to do. Omnivores eat both plants and meat, so they need to be able to do both. They're less specialized, right? But they have the ability to both rip and tear when needed and to be able to crush and chew when needed. But they're neither, they're not going to be as good as the herbivore and carnivore at their specialized things, right? So omnivores like us eat both meat and plants. Herbivores only eat plants, and carnivores only eat meat. If you know that, you're good. Let's move on to the exercises for this lesson. First one here, brainstorm some examples for each of these. Now, I've given you some already, but you might want to have a little bit of a Google or think about the organisms you know. What do they like to eat? Which one would you put them in? Think about their teeth, if you can. Are there any organisms you know with teeth that fit those details in slide 20? I'll leave that up to you. When you finish that, move on to slide 22 and identify each of these eaters based on their skull. Oh wow, so we've got this one here, we've got some incisors at the front, a bit of a gap, and then some big, what we look like premolars and then molars. This one here, we can see, I guess, some premolars there. We've got some stuff, interesting stuff going on there. Maybe a canine, maybe some incisors. Interesting. And this one here, oh wow, look at those big old canines. I wonder what they could be for. So, figure out what type of eater they are and put your reasoning in here. If you finish that, there's a little extra for experts task here for you, talking about what we call adaptive advantages. If you're interested in that sort of thing, that's what senior biology is all about, understanding adaptive advantages. And we want you to define the various types of teeth that they have and do a little bit of exploring. Learn about these sorts of things, give it a Google, see what interesting stuff you can find relating to this question here. Now, we're going to move on to our final lesson, which is just a little bit of reflection relating to the content for this week. You'll see that Ms. Farsolo, who's made the slides for this week, has done some awesome work asking you some challenging questions, which will ask you to Huritao, or to reflect, right? What is the main function of the digestive system? You can pop in your answer there. I want you to explain the difference between ingestion, digestion, absorption, and egestion, and define where those take place. You can put those all here. If you've got your understanding down packed, you should be able to do this from memory. But give it a go. See how you do. I want you to define those 4 major types of teeth. Try doing it from memory, but the answers are there for you on slide 19. And then, when you're done, we want you to describe the teeth found in carnivores, herbivores, and omnivores, and relate those teeth and their structures to their diets, or to the diets of each of those types of organisms. All right, and that brings us to the end of the week's worth of content. If you have any questions, please send me an email. Otherwise, have a lovely weekend. Look after yourselves, and I will see you next week. Okay, ka kite, matewa.